What if the most dangerous generation isn't the loudest, but the quietest? The kids who came home to empty houses, watched systems fail, and learned one rule early: survive on your own. Born between 1965 and 1980, they didn't grow up with guarantees. They grew up with instability. They don't panic in chaos. They don't overshare pain. They observe, they calculate, and when the time comes, they act. This is the dark psychology of Generation X. They were not raised in comfort. They were raised in uncertainty, and uncertainty leaves marks you cannot see. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, grew up in the space between collapsing trust and rising tension, in a country still shaking from the Vietnam War, still processing the betrayal of the Watergate scandal, still whispering about nuclear threats like bedtime stories no child should hear. And while adults argued about politics and power, something quieter was happening inside empty houses across America. Children were learning that silence has weight. They came home to locked doors they opened themselves, to afternoons without supervision, to televisions humming in dim rooms, to instructions written on sticky notes instead of spoken out loud. And slowly, a psychological blueprint formed. If no one is coming, I must handle it. If no one is watching, I must control myself. If the world is unstable, I must be steady. This was not empowerment, this was adaptation. And adaptation under stress changes the nervous system. Divorce rates were rising, layoffs were common, corporations downsized without apology, and children absorbed a brutal lesson early. Loyalty does not guarantee safety. Promises expire. Security is temporary. And so Gen X became observers before they became participants, scanning rooms, measuring tone shifts, detecting insincerity. Because when trust breaks publicly, children learn to trust privately. Their humor turns sharp, ironic, sometimes dark, because sarcasm is armor. It lets you laugh at chaos without admitting it scares you. You could hear it in the cultural pulse, in the restless distortion of Nirvana, in the unapologetic reinvention of Madonna. Authenticity over illusion, truth over polish, even if the truth was uncomfortable. They rejected shiny surfaces because they had seen what hides beneath them. They did not crave hype, they demanded evidence. But here is where it gets darker. Independence learned too early can harden into emotional isolation. The child who solves problems alone becomes the adult who struggles to ask for help. Vulnerability feels like exposure without guarantee. Dependence feels dangerous. They mastered competence, yet quietly feared collapse. They carried responsibility early, cooking meals, caring for siblings, managing their own schedules, and competence became identity. If I am useful, I am safe. Then came adulthood, and the world did not slow down. Recessions hit, industries shifted, technology exploded, analog childhoods collided with digital futures, and once again, Gen X adapted, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. They learned computers as tools, not toys. They watched the internet rise and immediately questioned it. Privacy mattered because they remembered a time before everything was recorded, before identity became performance. Films like The Breakfast Club were not just teen dramas, they were psychological confessions, stereotypes cracking open to reveal loneliness, pressure, invisibility. Gen X saw themselves in that tension, misunderstood but self-aware, cynical yet searching. And here lies the psychological paradox that defines them. They distrust systems but shoulder responsibility. They question authority but become reliable leaders. They avoid the spotlight but hold the structure together. They appear detached but feel deeply. They learn to regulate emotion internally because external reassurance was inconsistent. In crisis, they do not explode first, they calculate. They have lived through instability before,
Market crashes, cultural shifts, technological disruption, uncertainty is not a new villain, it is an old acquaintance. Their nervous systems brace instead of break. Yet beneath that resilience is fatigue, the exhaustion of being the steady one, the capable one, the bridge between aging parents and growing children, the generation sandwiched between louder voices, often overlooked, rarely dramatized, quietly carrying weight. And the suspense lingers here. What happens when the strong one gets tired? Gen X rarely announces burnout, they endure it. They rarely broadcast struggle, they compartmentalize it. They rarely demand recognition, they continue. Their love is not loud, but it is fierce. They may not narrate their emotions online, but they will show up in silence at midnight if needed. Loyalty runs deep because they know what instability feels like. They resist micromanagement not from arrogance, but from memory. Control equals survival. Autonomy reduces risk. Dependency once meant vulnerability. They are skeptical of trends because they have watched trends collapse. Skeptical of institutions because they have seen institutions fail. Skeptical of promises because they have watched promises dissolve. Yet they are not hopeless, they are strategic. Hope, for them, must be earned. The darkest truth about Generation X is this: they were trained by absence. Absence of supervision, absence of guaranteed stability, absence of blind trust. And from that absence, they built competence, resilience, emotional containment. But containment has a cost. Feelings stored too long turn inward. Pressure managed too long becomes silent strain. Still, they endure. They adapt. They analyze. They build quietly. They do not need applause to function. They do not need constant validation to persist. A generation forged in uncertainty does not fear change, it anticipates it. A generation shaped by broken trust does not collapse easily, it prepares. A generation that survived alone does not panic in empty rooms, it evaluates exits. Generation X is not loud, not flashy, not desperate for attention. It is measured, skeptical, observant, controlled. The calm surface over deep water. And if you listen closely, beneath the sarcasm and the silence, you will hear it. Not fear, not weakness, but calculation, endurance, and a strength built the hard way, in the quiet hours after school, in the flicker of late-night television, in the understanding that no one was coming, so they became the ones who could handle it. And here's the part no one talks about. Generation X was never trying to be loud, famous, or viral. They were training in silence. While the world chased attention, they mastered endurance. While others demanded guarantees, they prepared for collapse. They don't need applause to survive, and they don't need permission to adapt. Because a generation raised without safety nets doesn't fear the fall. It already knows how to land.